don't think they live where they live. They just stopped coming for whatever reason. But that's good and bad.
The time for convening has arrived, so we will start this evening's proceedings. We have 3 different meetings that we're going to hold, starting with the Public Facilities Authority. I would like to call this special meeting of the Public Facilities Authority to order for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. Will the Secretary please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening. First, I would just like to remind all those in attendance to please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices at this time. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Chair Rusty Paul.
Present.
Member John Paulson. Here. Member Melody Kelly. Present. Member Melissa Mueller.
Here.
Member Jody Rochelle. Here. Member Tibby DiGiulio. Here. Member Andy Bauman.
Here. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of the meeting agenda for the Public Facilities Authority special meeting for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025.
We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve the meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the meeting agenda. Meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Chairman Paul.
Ms. Rochelle.
I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes for June 3rd, 2025.
Have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, to approve the meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on the approval of the minutes. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting minutes are approved. Moving to new business, will the Secretary please read the item?
This is PFA 2025-07, consideration of resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding by and between 6150 Sandy Springs Owner LLC, the Sandy Springs Development Authority, and the City of Sandy Springs Public Facilities Authority, presented by Director of Economic Development, Chris Burnett.
Mr. Burnett.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the PFA. Good to be with you this evening to talk about what I think is an exciting and excellent project for the city. Yeah. I'm in the dark, okay.
Yeah. You need a little light on your
subject. Looks like maybe a spotlight up there is out.
Yeah.
It's kind of dark over there and there, too.
Why don't you go ahead until we get the lighting?
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So we are meeting tonight to discuss a tax abatement proposal that was approved recently by the Development Authority relating to a project that is being done on the site of what is currently known as the Hitson Center. You all will know it's the 8.1 acre tract of land on the southwest corner of Sandy Springs Circle and Mount Vernon. The Hitson Center has been owned by the church for many years. It houses a gymnasium building, Sunday school classes. There was a daycare center there. In fact, the original Westland School many decades ago was started in that building. As is the case with many religious organizations, especially post-COVID, with tithes and offerings declining and with some members of congregations aging, the financial issues that confront churches today are much different than they were years ago. And for churches that have outstanding real estate assets like this, it's an excellent opportunity for them to monetize the value of that real estate and use those proceeds to build new facilities if that's appropriate, or to form endowments in order to have investment earnings to sustain church operations. And I think that's what Sandy Springs Methodist Church will do. They'll probably follow both of those paths with the proceeds from the sale of this 8.1 acres in land to a subsidiary of Trammell Crow in a joint venture relationship with a company called Third and Urban. Before we get started, I'll tell you just a little bit about who Trammell Crow is. The company was founded in Dallas, Texas in 1948, and by 1971, Forbes magazine called Trammell Crow, the largest private developer in the U.S. The company went public in 1990, I believe it was 1997. Company went public, and then in 2006 was acquired by CBRE, which is now designated as the largest real estate firm in the world. So when we in our department are evaluating the ability of firms to execute, financial capacity, especially during these economic times, is so important. The best plans in the world without money are simply plans. You've got to have both the money and the funding capacity in order to execute. And I think that's why I've been excited about this project, is because we know Trammell Crow, through its affiliation with CBRE, has the financial wherewithal. They have their financing and they have their capital in place. So with that backdrop on who we're working with, this is the proposed development. It's called Hillcrest Mixed-Use Development, 362 traditional stack flat apartment units of varying bedroom sizes, also 30 townhomes that'll be on the western side of the property. There's also 18,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space, including what we call a jewel box restaurant, which is at the entrance to the development. You'll see the entrance. There's an image of a white car there. That is actually, or will be, an extension of Hildebrand. So to get your point of reference, we're looking at the property as if we were standing just above Sandy Springs Circle, looking west towards the Hitson Center site. Now, I want to stress that the city is really not engaged in the development itself. Trammell Crow came and asked for no concessions, for no variations in height, for nothing that you all, as a body, as a council, had to hear. And I think you've read some news articles about the city investing in the project. The fact is, we're putting money in through a tax abatement in order to build 111 parking spaces. They will be in the garage building that Trammell Crow is building, or their contractor, New South Construction, will build for the development. Those parking spaces will be used by their residents, by the patrons that go to the retail shops and restaurants. 111 of those spaces will be ours. They'll be dedicated to city parking first and foremost. It's possible that we may use the same, or they may use the same parking company we currently use to manage those spaces, but that decision has not yet been made yet. But I want to stress what we're talking about tonight relates only to the 111 new parking spaces in the new garage. Before we go any further, any questions on this rendering? If you guys got a good frame of reference there, we'll move on to sort of the meat of the discussion. Okay. All right, we have drafted a letter of intent. It's a tri-party agreement between the property owner, in this case it's Trammell Crow's subsidiary, which will build this asset, the Sandy Springs Development Authority, and this will also have to be approved by the Public Facilities Authority, which is the reason for the meeting tonight. And in the Memorandum of Understanding, it's currently a non-binding MOU. It will ultimately go to a binding MOU if you all approve this tonight and we move forward on execution of the documents. As I noted, it's 111 parking spaces will be designated for city use through a parking easement agreement. This will replace, I want to stress this, right now there are 105 surface parking spaces on the property. City has a usage agreement on that with Sandy Springs Methodist Church. If we don't do this transaction, we will lose access for perpetuity to those 105 spaces because they're going away. They're going to be demoed, and this new development that we just saw will be built in their place. So the options are either to go forward with this agreement or lose the 105 overflow spaces that the city currently uses, especially for our larger events. If we move forward, we are proposing that the first 2 hours would be free for patrons parking in our spaces, city spaces. This would mirror the parking agreement that we have here at the deck at City Springs. All of the revenue from our spaces would come to the city, as they do now for the spaces that we have here. The city would be obligated to fund on a prorated basis our portion of garage-related expenses and capital expenditures. It's going to roughly be about 20% of the total cost to maintain the garage will be the city's, 80% will be Trammell Crow's because that's the split. They'll have about 80% of the total parking spaces in the garage. We'll have about 20%, and we'll split the expenses on an 80-20 basis. If we own the spaces 100%, we would have to pay 100% of the expenses on the garage. So we are spreading the expenses across a larger number of spaces. I mentioned earlier that there'll be conversations with a third-party parking management company, perhaps the one the city uses, that would aid in the operations of the garage, potentially for both the city and Trammell Crow together if we use the same provider. Next, the owners, Trammell Crow, their subsidiary, or any acquirers thereto, would have the rights after 50 years to buy this back from the city or to pay the city out for our 111 spaces. What we've proposed is that it would be at least 200% of the hard cost associated with the construction of the spaces. The spaces themselves are about $3,312,000. It's about $29,500, $29,600 per space. In the event that we were bought out of those spaces, the payment would be a minimum of $6,624,000, which would be twice what we are putting in to build the 111 spaces. And based on when the buyout occurred, the owner, Trammell Crow, or its subsidiaries, would have the ability to pay the difference between what we as a city had received over the years from our parking revenues, but ultimately to a minimum of $6,624,000, roughly twice the cost of what it's going to take to build it. The Development Authority, the owner would be entitled to, the owner being Trammell Crow, would be entitled to receive a 3.5% development fee on the hard cost of constructing the city's spaces, so 3.5% of $3.3 million. And you'll see that in the overall budget in just a moment. Also, if there's any other infrastructure cost incurred by Trammell Crow where they represent us as a GC or their GC represents us, then a 3.5% GC fee would be paid on that infrastructure cost as well. So finally, in no event shall the total of this project exceed $4,877,333. That includes hard cost to pay for the construction of 111 spaces, and that number will be finalized at guaranteed maximum price, but we feel very good about that bid right now based on where New South has priced out this project. All costs associated with infrastructure improvements, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. And finally, soft costs related to this transaction, which are primarily legal fees and the fee that would be paid to the Development Authority. I don't know if you can read this. Hopefully this shows up well on your screens. This is a rough calculation, an estimate of what the tax on this property will be. I want to remind you all that currently it's zoned as a church, operated as a church. It is not on the tax digest. And so by virtue of this transaction, this property will go on to the property tax digest. And we use numbers here at Ashton Springs in terms of calculating values to run these rough estimates. With a total taxable value estimated after completion of this project at $131 million, an assessed value which is 40% of $52.4 million, and based on the tax rate of 3.09, and that includes county, school system, and city, you'd be looking at a first year's property tax of $1,620,000 to $1,621,000 approximately. And if you apply a 3% annualized growth rate, you can see that by year 10, the estimated property taxes would be about $2.1 million.
And Chris, can I interrupt and ask you a question?
Yeah.
So when you say annual tax, that's not just the Sandy Springs tax, correct?
That is correct. That would be the three components together,
School,
county, school, and city.
of which the city's portion is roughly 15%, is that right?
That's correct.
Right. So when we see $1.6 million, or just for every $1 million of taxes that would be paid, $150,000 of that would have been coming to the city, and $850,000 would have been going to the schools and to the county. Is that right?
That's correct. And our portion under that scenario, let's call it 15%, would have been about $240,000 a year. And under this scenario, we'll show how the recuperation through the abatement is going to significantly increase that over the 10-year term. So that's the backdrop for the calculation of the property taxes. Total abated taxes are estimated at roughly $4,882,000 during the 10-year term of the abatement. That's standard under Fulton County's policies. If you applied a net present value of that, it would be about $3.6 million. But total taxes in the undiscounted base are about $4.8 million over the term of the 10 years. You can see how the money will be spent. $3,312,000 for 111 parking spaces. The developer fee of $116,000 is based on 3.5% of the $3.3 million in parking construction cost. The Development Authority of Sandy Springs would receive a fee of $163,784 that would go into the Development Authority's account for future uses. Other infrastructure improvements, $900,000. That is going to be committed to streetscape, roads, safety improvements in the City Springs district. We do not have a specific budget today on how those funds will be used. We'll be working with the traffic team to assess how to best utilize those dollars. But we know that road safety, particularly crossing from this property over to City Springs and over to Heritage on the Green, are an important component of that, so that residents and patrons can cross the street safely, even if they cross at a mid-block versus up at the traffic light. So we'll be focusing on, for example, a Hawk crossing may be an option here, and we'll be looking at different options on how to invest that $900,000 in infrastructure improvements around City Springs. Estimated legal cost for the transaction is just shy of $220,000. We do have a 5% contingency built in here. That's 5% of the hard cost of construction, and that would be utilized. Our portion of any unforeseen expenses on garage construction would be covered within this 5%. And finally, and that number, if you add those up, comes to $4,877,333. There's a slight difference between that and the estimated abated taxes. Anything above $4,877,333 would inure to the benefit of Trammell Crow. And so our retention would be capped at $4,877,333. Finally, just to go through this in a little greater detail in terms of soft costs, as an example, $120,000 of that is for city-borne legal fees with our team, Jim Woodward's firm, Dan Lee's firm, also Austin & Byrd, which is representing Trammell Crow and its subsidiaries in the transaction. Their legal fees are $97,500. We've got some small transactional fees with Synovus Bank and recording fees, which is how we get to $219,700. And you can see the breakout there. It's $50,000, et cetera, there for Austin & Byrd to arrive at $97,500. The city's cost is approximately $70,000 to Woodward and Parnell and $50,000 to Dan Lee's firm. So when we look at what our options are, first of all, as I mentioned, we could either decline this and not have a replacement for the 105 parking spaces we'll be losing through construction. We could approve this abatement, and it would be repaid through the taxable abatement over a 10-year term. So therefore, the city would fully recuperate over the 10 years the cost to build the spaces and the $900,000 in costs for infrastructure improvements around the sites and the roads here in downtown, plus recovering the transaction cost on the abatement. The third option would be that the city doesn't do the abatement and pays for this out of our own capital funds. We feel like doing the abatement makes all the sense in the world because it achieves something that I think is going to be very good for our community. Again, when you're growing like we are and you're having more and more attendance at events, the more parking you can have, I think the better that is for our citizens and guests. And being able to do this and package it as part of an existing construction project, again, if we had to go out and build these on our own, it would be a good bit more expensive, but there's economies of scale that you get by adding these 111 spaces to the garage that Trammell Crow had already planned for the site. So we're measurably reducing our cost per space by doing this. And again, it's replacing almost a little better than one-for-one the spaces we'll be losing through the sale of this property. So therefore, the Development Authority did approve this transaction on June the 5th, and we're asking you all to consider its approval tonight so that we may execute the MOU on behalf of the PFA and move forward with further negotiations and documenting the transaction.
All right, you've heard the report of the Director of Economic Development. What's the desire of the PFA?
Chairman Paul,
Ms. Rochelle, excuse me, Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve agenda item PFA 2025-7, resolution to approve a memorandum of understanding by and between 6150 Sandy Springs Owner LLC and the Sandy Springs Development Authority and the City of Sandy Springs Public Facilities Authority.
We have a motion by Ms. Mueller. Is there a second? Motion by Ms. Mueller, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve agenda item PFA 2025-07, a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding by and between 610 Sandy Springs owner, Sandy Springs Development Authority, and City of Sandy Springs. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Yep.
So Chris, I think that this is a really great deal for the city. We're going to get paid back over time. We're not going to lose those spaces. I know that when we had the Billy Joel, Elton John tribute band, I got caught in the garage because we were out of capacity. So this will help with that. And I would, before we got into discussion on development, I didn't know that parking spaces for garages are so expensive. And $29K a space, I think we had estimates at one point in time, I don't know, for other spaces up to, 40 or 50K a space. So it's 29 is seems pretty reasonable.
Transaction actually took place where they have purchased the property, or are they still, is this still pending?
It's still pending.
It's still pending.
Potential acquisition, targeted acquisition date for the company is in July.
In July. And when would they anticipate getting started on this?
Well, I know that they've already told us they will allow the city to use this lot for 4th of July fireworks. But shortly after their acquisition, I think the Hitson Center and demo would begin probably as early as August or September.
Mr. Bowden.
Chris, it was a pleasure working with you on this.
Thank you.
Phil, a couple of questions just to confirm. This project never needed to come to the city for zoning approval, is that right?
That is correct.
They were building this regardless?
Yes, sir.
I mean, they buy the property and get their loan, get their equity, they were building it. Are we aware of any variances
I am not.
at this point? No
I
variances?
don't think anything has been requested.
So far, I mean, this is a project that they designed, they're building, it's a market rate deal. The city's role is sort of came about after they've already decided to do what they're going to do. Is that right?
That is correct. The property already had the entitlements needed to do this type of mixed-use development, so therefore City Council did not have to go through a rezoning. They did not ask for any height variances or anything that was outside of what the property was already entitled for.
And to be very clear, there's 362 apartments. Those are all rentals, correct?
Correct.
The 30 townhomes are also for rent. Is that right?
That is correct.
And on the money that we are spending is going to get reimbursed to us out of tax dollars. Is that right? I mean, that's effectively right. Would have only been 15%. So when we say these are roughly $30,000 per parking space, the economics of this deal is the city is getting these for roughly 15 cents on the dollar. Is that right? I mean, if we were to go with your third option and do the parking spaces, we would be paying the $4 million that we'd be paying, or the 3-something, and when we got taxes back, we would only be getting a small portion of those taxes, not this full amount. Is that right?
That's correct.
So,
and I will point out, to your point, the price per space would not include land.
That's right.
So if we took a piece of city land, for example, one of the tracks at City Springs 2.0, to factor our overall cost in to what it would take for us to build parking, we would have to factor in our land cost for that portion of the land that was dedicated to parking.
Right, and if we ever get around to doing a city center phase 2, which we all hope that we would do at some point, this is just sort of adds to the equation of the parking. It's that much less parking we might ultimately need to support the other parcels that we are doing. This can support anything in the area, not just concerts on the green.
And I think that was a big part of our ask of Trammell Crow about the security, safety and security, especially of crossing Sandy Springs Circle, perhaps down at Sandy Springs Place. Knowing that patrons going to the concerts on the green on Sundays or going to other events here at City Springs will be parking there. And so we want to make sure that they are able to cross safely. So part of that $900,000 is going to be used specifically for safety-related.
Right, but we're not
measures.
we're not offsetting money they would otherwise have to spend. I mean, we're doing things that we might want to do. There was no obligation for them to make the crosswalk safer. This is only things that we would have to do with our money if we wanted to do it anyway. We're not, to Councilman Paulson's question, none of the infrastructure improvements are things that they are required to do so that we're doing it for them. We're just doing value-add extra infrastructure. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, any infrastructure requirements that they have to do as a component of their permitting process, they will still have to do. These are decisions that we will make on how we want to continue to improve the downtown corridor through these abatement dollars.
Right, and I'm vice chair of the Development Authority. Thank you to the mayor for appointing me. This is probably the first deal we've done in many years. Is that right?
I know we haven't done one. This is my first one, and I'm coming up on my one-year anniversary. So.
Right, and I appreciate the work. I do want to share a little bit of the background so we have it. Having learned about this project sometime late last year that they seemed to be actually proceeding, I looked at the plans and was concerned about two things. One, the loss of the parking spaces, and the second thing I was concerned about was the absence of for-sale housing on this project. I think as a community, if we had a say on this, we would like to see more for-sale housing. In particular, I saw those 30 townhomes and was hoping that we could convince them to make that as for-sale product. But for economic reasons at this point, financing, the warranty issues that come, doing 30 for-sale houses in a project of 400 or so units is a very complicated, difficult thing. It's just not the path of least resistance for getting this deal done. So for a little further background, I reached out to the Trammell Crow and the Third and Urban team, and I asked for a meeting with the intent of asking whether there were anything we could do to incentivize them to build more for-sale housing. If, for example, they don't need variances right now, but if, for example, they wanted to build higher, would there be a possibility that they would incorporate for-sale housing? They rejected that. They said we're really too far down the road. But that is a goal of the city for sure, is to have for-sale housing. And then the second thing, and this is, I think, where we're landing, and I think was pretty creative, was could we joint venture on some parking spaces to replace the parking spaces. Having arranged the meeting, I did invite you, Chris, to join us. I actually invited the mayor, but the mayor, I think, was out of town at the time, so was unable to attend. We met with those folks back in November or December, and we proposed those ideas, at which time they said they would take it back. And they did go back, and they turned out they were agreeable for the parking. And as much as we tried, the for sale was just not going to work. And then, while there were some, I think, legitimate good questions about whether we really wanted the parking space across the street, I think there were some safety concerns. We went ahead and kind of moved forward on this. And there was actually a point in time that more of the excess proceeds were going to be retained by Trammell Crow. But we did a good job, Chris, you and Dan did a good job negotiating for those excess proceeds to be land into the infrastructure bucket so that we're getting that close to $1 million. So I want to commend you, Chris, and I appreciate Dan Lee and the legal team for taking this vision and structuring the deal in a way that could get it done that really is a win-win for the community. What we are doing is simply adding on to a project that was already happening, and it was a creative deal. It's the kind of deal making I think we need to continue to do to see redevelopment in the city.
And I do want to, along those lines, need to recognize the folks at Trammell Crow and at Third and Urban who've been a pleasure to work with on this. We have negotiated up this deal almost $1 million from where it started because of the infrastructure needs that as we want to continue to improve downtown, and being able to use abatement money to do that is our most economically viable way to do that. And it helps them too. because, again, the better quality project they can have, the safer for their residents, the more attractive it's going to be. They're going to fill those units up faster. They're going to fill their restaurants up faster. And so it really has been a great relationship with both of those companies to get to where we are today.
Ms. Rochelle.
So talking about abatements, the abatements go from 50% to 5%, and then they go away. And as far as for sale owner-occupied housing, is it possible? I know, Eden, I talked to you today, and you said that you talked to them a lot about owner-occupied housing, and that's so important for us to get more owner-occupied housing in Sandy Springs, and especially around here. Can we use abatements, some of these abatements, to encourage the for sale housing on this project?
On this project?
Yeah, on this project.
We cannot.
Why is that?
Because primarily many of these projects are driven by what investors are willing to do. And in this case, they've got a very large, globally recognized investor partner in this that's looking at long-term returns. And there are really two challenges with putting for sale in as part of a development like this. First of all, if you have 30 owners that come in and you lose control on how to manage the aesthetics of those units, some owners keep their units up differently than others. And if you've got a very large, in this case, probably approaching $200 million investment in an asset, and you've got one guy that's parking junk cars out in front of his unit, then it brings down the overall aesthetics. So a lot of developers who do mixed use just simply don't want for sale as a component of that. The second component is the investment yields, the returns. If you're selling off even 30 units, and let's just say they sell for $600,000 a piece, pick a number, and your average rate of return on that is, as an investor, is 8%, then you've lost 8% on tens of millions of dollars because you've sold it off. You've made a one-time pop, but then you've got to reinvest that, or you've lost your cash flow on those 30 units. And so with these big institutional investors that are very disciplined in their approach to investing, and they hold these assets for long term, they're really looking at cash flow yields over a long-term period. So inherently, they are not sellers in general. They tend to be asset holders. And so when you require a component of for sale, you kind of get away from what these bigger institutional investors want to do. And with capital still a challenge, finding an institutional investor and a bank to come in and put this kind of money into a project is candidly, it speaks to the strength of Trammell Crow, because the market is still tight out there. And so I think for us to try to retrade the deal when we really don't have a leg to stand on because they didn't ask for any zoning, we can't require, I think, Dan, correct me, we cannot require for sale housing under the Fair Housing Act. Is that correct? Yeah. So again, I think it's a slippery slope from both just a legal perspective and, in this case, an investment perspective because of who the players are in this transaction.
Mayor?
Well, I think it's really important in the future for us to try to do everything we can to get for sale owner-occupied housing in Sandy Springs. So
well, I love it, and we'll see in just a few minutes the number of for sale units that we do have in the queue right now. It's a nice number, but again, the reality is of where the financial markets are right now, and just how attractive Sandy Springs is to millennials. We know we're one of the fastest growing millennial cities in the U.S., my children included, and they just can't afford to buy a home here. And so high quality 5-star apartments is what we're getting right now. That's where the interest lies. And that's the people, the consumers that are coming in and filling up our restaurants and coming to our events and concerts and things of that nature. And so it is partly about our success as a retail destination is driven by rooftops too. And land cost is so high that doing for sale rooftops downtown, when you're talking about land that's approaching $2 million an acre, I can't imagine what kind of home prices you'd have if you're spending $2 million an acre to build those homes on.
Mayor, real quick, if council, are you done, Jody?
Yeah.
Yes, that was the purpose. One of the purposes of the meeting. The tool that we might have had in the toolbox was if they wanted more height, then we would have had a stake in a discussion about what the development was. But unlike years past when we were doing a let's make a deal on what these developments were looking like. This was a deal that they were free to build this exact way. But that was the reason I had approached them, was to see what we could do creatively, and it didn't work. But we do need to try. I come from a background of doing condo conversions. This is being built to a very high level of finish, and there's nothing to prevent somebody down the road when the economics change. I've done probably close to 2,000 units of condo conversions in my career, where I took apartments and was able to convert them successfully, take them for rent for ownership, including a project here in Sandy Springs 20 years ago, where we took 150 apartments, converted it to condominiums, and eventually it became a project that now exists in Sandy Springs that, for the most part, is all first-time home buyers. So that is not precluded in the future, but I do agree that we need to do everything we can to facilitate, through our policies and our economic development initiatives, more for sale housing.
I could not agree more.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none. And by the way, as a point of information, the power's out. We're on generator power. So, another storm has shut down the power in Sandy Springs. So fortunately, our generator's working. All right, hearing no further conversation, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-07, a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding by and between 6150 Sandy Springs owner, the Sandy Springs Development Authority, and City of Sandy Springs. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Mr. DiGiulio. Mr. DiGiulio moves adjournment of the Public Facilities Authority. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Paulson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are adjourned. Now we will move to the work session. Mr. Burnett, don't go anywhere. The Economic Development Update. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you very much. I guess I can call you mayor and council now, right? We're an official mayor and council session. So I do want to try to be brief. I know we used a lot of time on what I think was very important, but I'll try to shorten that so we can get on to other business. You'll recall that at the annual retreat, we talked in depth about economic development in the city. And we thought it would be wise to give you sort of a mid-year checkup on where we are relative to the goals that we've set and to some of the projects that we had talked about back at the retreat, where how are those progressing. Also, I'm coming up on my one-year anniversary, as I mentioned, and sort of share some of the tidbits of what I'm seeing in the marketplace right now during my first year here, and both on the business side and on the real estate development side. So this first slide, and by the way, if you all have not met Madison is actually the brains of this operation. We call it economic development. She has been a wonderful addition to our team. She joined us at the first of this year after getting a double master's right from Auburn. And so she assembles much of this data for us and does all the research, and I could not be successful without her. So Madison, thank you. I appreciate everything. All right, so she pulled this list, and these are the 25 largest companies in Sandy Springs, headquartered in Sandy Springs by revenue. And it is an impressive group, starting, of course, with UPS, who I believe is celebrating their 35th anniversary being headquartered in Sandy Springs, and I was actually there this afternoon for a meeting. And you can see at $91 billion in revenue, they lead the pack. And then we come down through a very impressive list. Of course, we all know Mercedes-Benz has announced that they're moving additional offices here. And we're certainly hoping that we might also win their R&D facility, although we are competing with some other cities in Atlanta for that project. But we are definitely getting other divisions of Mercedes moving to Sandy Springs. And then you come on down the list to our smallest of the top 25, which is a company called Edible Arrangements, which many of you are familiar with. And they're about $530 million in revenue. So it's a pretty broad differential between number 1 and number 25. But when you add it all together, $262 billion in revenue in just the top 25 companies here. Well, you think about, we have 6,000 companies here. So when you look at just the top 25 generating this kind of revenue, one of these days, if we have a lot of time on our hands, we'll try to calculate what the total revenue generated by all 6,000 companies is. I think it's going to be a staggering number. But what is particularly impressive is that you look at the revenue per resident, it's about $2.4 million. For every man, woman, and child who lives in Sandy Springs, just these top 25 generate over $2.4 million in revenue per person on the 110,000 residents we have here. So if we ever wonder why we have such a robust community, I think this chart says a lot about that. When you see the quality of the companies here and the tremendous economic impact they have on us and on our economy. The ones highlighted in yellow, one of our goals was to have meetings with every one of our major companies over the course of the first year. And we're halfway into this fiscal year, and we've met with 12 already, and have a meeting with UPS coming up. That's tomorrow, right? So, and so we're making headway. We're trying to check them off, roughly 2 a month, so we can. That was part of our initiative, was to really solidify our relationship strongly with the major employers of Sandy Springs, and we're on track to accomplish that goal based on our progress to date. Quick fun fact, so of the top 10 cities that have Fortune 500 companies headquartered therein, the greater metro area of Atlanta is number 7 in the nation on that list, with 16 companies in the greater metro area. City of Atlanta has 6 of those. We have 6 of those. We also have one of the biggest European companies, obviously, in the world, Mercedes-Benz, with their U.S. headquarters here. They're traded on the Stuttgart Stock Exchange. Pretty amazing stat, but when you look at the number of Fortune 500 companies per resident, it's about, I think, one Fortune 500 company for every 18,000 residents. The only market I could find better than us is Irving. I'm sorry, not better than us, but even close to us is Irving, Texas. They've got about 250,000 people and 8 companies, so they have about 230,000. A Fortune 500 for every 230,000 or 23,000. So anyway, net effect is we've got an impressive array of companies, and it really makes an enormous impact on our economy. So let's talk about what we're doing in light of our goals that we defined. We look at corporate wins thus far in 2025. Mercedes announcing its consolidation of the North American headquarters to Sandy Springs, and it's moving 500 jobs from both Michigan and California here. And again, we're looking at, hopefully, the R&D facility could be part of that, but that decision has not yet been made by Mercedes, but we're doing our best to win that. Newell Brands, and many of you were there the other day for their ribbon cutting on their beautiful new space in the concourse. That was a big win to keep them, 180,000 square feet of office space that they've moved into, and that's really helped to stabilize the occupancy rates in the King and Queen buildings. StubHub recently announced that they are moving 56,000, or they're moving 7,000 Central Park with 56,000 square feet. It's the second largest office lease for an out-of-town tech company since 2021. Now, what that says is there's not been a lot of tech company movement. And with tech companies financially, in some sectors, struggling a bit to land StubHub's offices, they're moving some folks in from Utah and New York, was a big win for the city. We're not able to announce it yet, but we do have a mid-market private company that's already announced they're coming to Sandy Springs privately, and we'll be working with them shortly to hopefully have a press release and a ribbon cutting for their space as early as this fall. But we don't want to focus on just the big companies. We've had some nice wins on the smaller scale size. Stellings Walters Insurance, a 60-year-old company in Sandy Springs, recently took an entire floor in the Queen building. And IMA Financial Group, also a long-standing corporate resident here, took an entire floor in the King building. So those are nice wins at the smaller business level, and they all go together to help improve that occupancy rate, especially in the perimeter market. Next, we talked about, and our goal is increasing our marketing initiatives. Select Sandy Springs, our website is live now. Hopefully you've had a chance to go in and peruse that. It's an excellent tool for us in both recruiting businesses, educating business owners about who Sandy Springs is and the opportunities that exist here. We're also doing that through a quarterly newsletter. Madison does a great job along with Carter and our communications team on building this newsletter that we distribute to close to 6,000 businesses in the city. And then we are working on helping our businesses profile themselves, whether it's doing ads in our newsletters, helping them. Recently, Mr. 01 Pizza opened here. They've had enormous success, and the communications team had a lot to do with that by pushing social media pushes out about their openings and getting great exposure for that restaurant here in City Springs. They're doing extremely well right now. Business education and outreach, some of you attended the Powers Ferry Business Mixer. Also on the 25th, we have a North End Business Mixer up in Dr. Kelly's division or district. We've got signups going well for that. That's a way to connect with all of our businesses across all sectors. Our goal is to have these mixers in at least our 5 major business markets annually. Plus educational seminars. We did one earlier this year on access to capital. We've got one coming up in September on the proliferation of AI, and we'll look at other topics that we think are interesting to businesses that they want to attend. And again, it's all about creating that connectivity between our business community. Finally, we've done some analysis of the incentive programs that the city offers. Some of the cities do not post their incentives on their sites, so Madison had to do some digging there through personal conversations with their economic development directors. Our findings are that we're not too dissimilar to what other cities offer. We're at least as good, if not better in some cases. But again, there's not a huge disparity between and these are North Fulton cities who we would consider to be, and Dunwoody, who we would consider to be our principal competitors for business on this side of town. Where we did find a differential, and I'm not sure there's much we can do about it, but the tax abatement structure in DeKalb County is more lucrative than it is in Fulton County. And in fact, in many counties around Georgia, Fulton is more conservative with a 10-year cap on the duration of their abatements. DeKalb will do 15. And Dan, correct me, I believe they may have even gone longer than that in some cases. But Fulton seems to be very set on 10 years. And so we do think that has perhaps been not a totally level playing field, and we'd love to see Fulton be more flexible in the duration of their abatements going forward, but that would be something that they'd have to decide amongst their board. So at this time, we're making no recommendations to change the city's incentive package, but we'll stay on top of this, monitoring it closely, and perhaps we'll talk about that either at the retreat or perhaps at the mid-year review a year from now. And finally, pursuing new real estate development and redevelopment, given that we're principally a built-out city at this point. So much of our efforts are on redeveloping older properties. We're working with our development authority. We did have our first transaction come to development authority recently. That's the Trammell Crow tax abatement, as we talked about. Other projects in the queue right now, we're working to activate the Williams Payne House into a really neat boutique coffee shop, restaurant, or other type of shop, and utilizing the parks there to create a very special retail destination. We talked about Hillcrest, the new Trammell Crow Third and Urban project. We're continuing to have dialogue with Jamestown on the Parkside development. Just a few of the smaller projects. Right across the street is the VO project, 17 luxury condominiums going up there. Fifth Third Bank is in for their permitting on their new branch bank on Roswell Road just north of here. And there is a coming soon sign on the old La Plaza restaurant building. So our fingers are crossed that will actually get executed and we'll have a new restaurant coming in there in the not too distant future. And finally, in terms of our business-related goals, meeting with the developers has been a big part of what I've done this first year. Our goal was to meet with a minimum of one a year. We're well past that. We're already at 20 plus this year, and I think that number could be 30 or 40 by the end of this year. One a month. I'm sorry, yeah.
He did misspeak.
Yeah, I did misspeak. One a month. And the reality is I spend a lot of my time with developers. That's where my background lies. And fortunately, they'll take my phone calls.
Chris,
So,
what are you hearing from developers about developing in Sandy Springs?
So, certainly the most interesting asset class for developers right now continues to be multifamily. Especially with the vacancy rates in some of our office buildings, in the perimeter in particular, and an absence of rooftops in the perimeter. As you talk to a lot of the real estate owners that are there, and the business owners, or the businesses, and these can be very large companies, they talk about bringing more housing in, especially for their younger workforce, so that these young people that are currently having to commute in from somewhere else will have a nice apartment that they can move into. Those rooftops will bring in more retail development, especially restaurants, and that's an important thing to our employers in the perimeter market. We were over at North Park for a meeting recently and talking with their ownership, and they said the only real easily walkable restaurant to North Park is the Chick-fil-A, and they would love more options. Not that they're down on Chick-fil-A.
But you're talking about employers, right?
Employers.
Yes, but I was asking you about, you said you're meeting with developers once a month. What are you hearing from developers about their experience and ability to develop in Sandy Springs?
So there's no doubt that the move away from concrete and steel last year has created a whole new renewed interest in Sandy Springs. With construction costs still being as high as it is for concrete and steel, and now interest rates still elevated, and labor costs and tariff uncertainties, it's still very expensive to build. And so you all had the foresight to create a stimulus last year in going back to stick built, and that has reduced the cost. And then all of the other attributes of the city, whether it's our public safety, our public health, our robust job market and great companies, the quality of life, the arts, the culture, all of those things go into a package that I think, coupled with now having a reasonable cost of construction, has ignited an interest in Sandy Springs that really we probably haven't seen in quite a while. And so developers want to be here again. Financing markets are still tight. No doubt about that. Capital and debt are still a challenge to raise. But we're seeing a thawing in this market. We're starting to see more banks step up and do some multifamily as some of their mature projects roll off their books and they've got room. And so I think right now we're poised to see more opportunities, especially going into 26, unless there's a recession and unless cost rises further or unless rates go up, all the things that drive development. But I think the market itself is now perceived with significant interest by those developers.
Chris, how many apartments are on the books right now to come into Sandy Springs, new apartments?
Yeah, I tell you what, can I come back to that question because we've got that graphic I want to show you in just a moment. So again, I'm taking a lot of time, so I want to jump ahead with our development update. I'm going to go very quickly. We've talked about Hillcrest, so I'm not sure much we need to say further about that. But Jody, to your point, that's 362 multi-units and 30 townhomes, for rent townhomes. Number two is a 36-unit for sale development on Cliffwood called the Gregory. This is progressing through the LDP stage right now. This happens to be the same developer that's doing VIO, which is across the street. VIO is 17 units. Their website is reporting that 7 are currently under contract, and you've seen progress. It's nearly built out at this point. They'll be working on the interior, so that is moving ahead. So that's 17 for sale units. Next is Parkside. No new developments since we last talked. Jamestown still has an office building component in its Parkside plan, and office buildings are just difficult right now, again, because of the cost of construction and the rents that are required to pay for new office buildings. It's about double the rent that you would pay for an existing office building. 260-ish, Andy, plus some for sale townhomes. I think it's 262 units is what's in the Parkside plan. Next would be the North End, Dr. Kelly's region and John's region. These are for sale 16 townhome units on Pitts Road. That they're going through the submittal process we think is imminent. 9300 Roberts Drive, this would be 56 for sale condominiums. They're going through the LDP process as well. So those are some for sale homes that I mentioned that are coming to market. Wayfern is almost finished. This is the Fairfield development at the corner of Roswell Road and Dalrymple. 273 multifamily units, 10 for-lease townhomes, street grid system, and that is nearly built out. If you go by there, they're very close to completion. And finally, in the medical district, you've got Mill Creek doing the Lake Hearn development called 1299 Altmore. That's 341 units adjacent to Northside Hospital or to Pill Hill, and that's progressing through LDP and building permitting as well. And then finally, in the perimeter market, I think this is probably one that's a little further back on the burner. This has been on the burner for a while, but they are progressing through the LDP process, hoping to get near building permits. The reason I think this one could be a little more challenging is it's going to be 10 stories in nature, so it has to be concrete and steel. It would be 367 multi-units with retail and restaurant mixed-use space on the first floor. This is on the side of the Wells Fargo branch, which is on Hammond Drive across from the entrance to the concourse. So they would take down an old branch bank building and go up with this building. They've got a good group of architects in here. Smallwood is doing the design work on this project. So they've got some legitimate players on the design side. But finding capital in this, just because of the nature of the asset it is, in my opinion, will be more challenging than some of the other projects that are being considered. And we're all familiar with Embassy Road. This is the repurposing of the old office park. This is Insignia development. This will ultimately be 2 multifamilies, probably of about 300 units apiece, or 362 and 341 actually between the two. And then the third site that will ultimately be demoed and redeveloped, they're currently working on for sale. And we've been in contact with the principal developer that they're talking with about townhomes and condominiums for the third site. And then finally, you've got, this is a smaller assisted living facility of 100 units over on Peachtree Dunwoody. That's also going through LDP. And then a smaller for sale townhome unit also on Peachtree Dunwoody that is also progressing through LDP. So we like to say this year, we thought we would put more shovels in the ground this year. I think uncertainty with tariffs and trade and things of those nature and that volatility in the stock market we saw especially in Q1. We went from putting the shovels in the ground to sharpening the blades, but I think as you can still see there's a lot of projects in the queue that I believe will begin to come to fruition over the next 6 to 12 months. And so, Jody, you had asked the question about units. And so let me go to my graphic here. Pardon me just a moment. Over the next 3 to 5 years, based on the projects in the queue, my estimate is we'll have just over 1,700 traditional multifamily rental units, and that would include townhomes, coming to market, just based on what I believe will get done over the next 3 to 5 years. On the for sale side, we have about 200 condominiums and townhomes coming to market that I believe will come to market over that same time frame. And so you've got about 1,900 total housing units, and that doesn't include any of the tear-down rebuilds that we see in our neighborhoods. Those continue to go on where someone's taking an old home down. These are just projects that are related to what we consider the multifamily piece, either townhome, condominium, or apartment. All right, I've run long. I apologize for that. So any questions?
Any further questions? Mr. DiGiulio.
Chris, what's the vacancy rate on the commercial office right now?
So, Tilly, that is tracking at about 23% per CoStar's numbers. There's some debate on what the real vacancy is because you've got space that's still leased where companies have
moved out,
downsized their offices. In fact, that was a big component of Newell space, shadow space. So it still shows up as leased. I've heard numbers of 27 to 28% if you use the shadow space in addition to the real vacancy.
When we had our retreat, we had, I think it was 3 gentlemen talking about office space, et cetera, and they were talking about scraping space and redeveloping space. Have we had any of that where they've, for example, I was at my old office 2 weeks ago across the street from Costco, and was it 1118? It's more than 50% unoccupied. And it's been that way since I moved in there like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I was wondering, have we heard anything from some of these owners of property like that are going to repurpose that property? Because it's in wonderful location, obviously, but I mean, it doesn't do much for us or them for it to be sitting there vacant for years at an end. And they were talking about how the cost of keeping a building empty is like 8% because of the cost of security and taxes and insurance and stuff like that. Have we seen any movement at all on repurposing any of those office buildings that are underutilized?
Yes, so the Embassy Row side is exactly that. They'll ultimately take down 3 old office buildings that had very high vacancy rates and go back with residential mixed-use multifamily. This is public, so we can discuss it, well, I'm not going to talk about a project, but there is another one, and I'm going to wait to mention that one, but it would be also an existing office building that will soon be fully empty. And that one is more than likely to be redeveloped, probably into residential. And there's another meeting we've had recently with another development firm who has also earmarked another very old development that they would like to take down as well and go back with residential. So those conversations are being had. At this point, Embassy Row is the one that's actually in execution. The first of those office buildings has already been demoed. And they'll scrape that, and then they'll start moving forward with multifamily on that side over the next several months.
I have one question.
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to ask the question. Mr. Burnett, what about some of our older shopping centers that are maybe in play a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about any of those?
Yeah, so Mayor, even the oldest of our centers has pretty good occupancies right now. If you look at the overall occupancies, across the retail sector, it's about 10 million square feet of space, and we're tracking between a 4 and a 5% vacancy rate, which is a very low vacancy rate. And I've been surprised at the high rental rates that landlords are still trying to get for old buildings. And that's because there is a lack of space. We have restaurants right now that would love to open in Sandy Springs if we had a place to put them. But we just don't have enough sites, because there hasn't really been an abundance of new retail built in a long time. Most of the retail that's been built in recent years has been first floor retail that's required as part of our mixed-use multifamily developments. Well, that's not a huge amount of retail space. As an example, in Trammell Crow's development, it's only 18,000 square feet. That's going to fill up very, very quickly. And even the older centers, their occupancies are hanging strong. Now, they're with some tenants, as we've talked about, dollar stores and others that, are challenging as anchors, and you can bring in some challenging tenants as a result. But those companies that are in those spaces are able to stay in business and continue to pay their rent. So I think retail is where another great opportunity exists for us, especially restaurants in City Springs and retail space over in the perimeter to help be an amenity to all the rooftops that are being added. And also, I personally think there's a great opportunity in the North End at some point. And we're hopeful to, and I think one of the things that this body I would encourage to talk about in the coming year is what else can we do in the North End to help stimulate development there? Because there is one project that we know of that is ripe for redevelopment, and we're hoping to work with those owners to make that happen in 2026. Ms. Rochelle.
So the additional 1,700 units brings our apartments to about 28,000 in Sandy Springs.
I don't have that number off the top of my head, so you probably know more, but that's probably close.
So at what point do we say, okay, we have enough apartments and we obviously need more owner-occupied for-sale housing. Are we working towards that goal?
Well, I know that we've talked about doing a housing study, Eden, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's on our 2026 agenda. Yeah, so it's in the budget for next year to do a housing study, which I imagine will have a strong focus on for sale. You know, the thing, though, that drives all development is first and foremost, the capital markets. What does the capital market want to loan in and invest in? And multifamily continues to be a strong asset of the capital market, stronger. I mean, let's face it, who wants to go build a new office building right now? And so if you've got an empty building in the perimeter, what else can you do with it? You know, in many cases, there's significant debt on those buildings, and so you've got to deal with a lender who may have to foreclose it and wipe out the debt. And is the lender, if it's already zoned or entitled for multifamily, then unless this body takes away that zoning and goes back to a single-family only zoning, then a developer looks at it and says, oh, I can do multifamily, mixed-use, retail on those sites. And that's the highest and best use. That's the highest value for your land. There's almost no land left in the city of Sandy Springs. As you all know, we've been built out for decades. And so the only way you create land is by tearing something else down. And if you have land that's already entitled for large office buildings, then actually apartments is a downzoning from a large office building that's already there. And so this council, or the next council, I would encourage, take the housing study, go through it intently, and find those nodes or those pockets where a focus on single family or even townhomes, or condos are tough. They're just tough to get built. And we're going to see how these new projects do that are in the queue right now. Townhomes, I believe there's a real market for them, and there continues to be a robust market for single family. But I think trying to put single family in the perimeter, for example, when you're paying $2.5 million an acre for land, as we heard from our real estate panel, whether it's knocking down old apartments or tearing down old office buildings, the numbers just aren't there right now because the assets are still too valuable. So either the market has to suffer badly, values have to drop substantially, or the council must take action to roll back some of the zonings and drill down on single family and do away with some of the entitlements that exist already out there. That's a big decision for next year.
Let me pose a question to the city attorney. What leeway do we have about rolling back zonings? Do we have that capability unless the property owner asks for it?
You have the power to rezone, but at the end of the day, if there's an entitled property that exists today, it'd be almost impossible to remove that entitlement.
I guess that's my question, how feasible is it to try and downzone some of these properties that just arbitrarily by the council?
There'd be some basis for it, and future planning is the way to get the inroad to that. But at the end of the day, the way the law is moving, when property is entitled and you take that away, it gets very close to a taking.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I've just an observation. I'm really glad you didn't retire and move to the island a year ago, okay?
Thank you, John.
I'm glad you came to work for us, for the city. I've been here my 16th year. I've never had better visibility into what's happening in our city than I've had over the last couple of months with your briefings and the work that you and Madison are doing. So I'm glad you're here, Chris. Anything I can do to keep you here, make you happy, let me know, okay?
Thank you, John. All right. Dr. Kelly.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Just have a few questions. I want to try to unpack the term incentive. So if I go to select Sandy Springs and I kind of click the incentive link, it takes me to the incentives that we have with the different tiers where I think we waive some fees or occupational taxes. Yeah, the occupant tax rate waivers and the impact fee waiver. But there's more incentives than that, like when we're using that term.
So I would say our three major incentives would relate to business and occupational tax waivers, building permit fees if new square footage is being added, and impact fees Building permitting fees can be used for both existing projects and new projects. Impact fees would be related only to new construction. So those are sort of three tools we have in the toolbox. Tax abatements are a fourth tool.
Okay.
And, we've used those in some cases over the years to offer additional incentives. One of the things I think that you'll hear from our team next year, Councilwoman Mular has mentioned this on several occasions, is what are some things that we can do for smaller business owners and smaller buildings all along the Roswell Road corridor, especially in the north end and down in City Springs. Facade grant programs or discounted loan programs. What are other cities doing through their downtown development authorities? Those are all additional tools you all may decide to add to the toolbox. But the four major ones right now are B&O, permitting, impact fees, and abatements.
So financing, that term comes up a little bit, at least when I'm talking to people out in the community about opportunities or tools that we have available to us. Do we have that tool available to offer loans?
So, and I may have to punt this one to Dan, but because we've talked about it some, but if my memory is correct, the state has the ability to do some loan programs. Mm-hmm. But Dan, I don't think local municipalities do. Could you speak to that?
Mm-hmm.
As far as acting as a bank, the city does not have the authority, nor with the development authority. In some jurisdictions, what happens is that you have a private placement bond. As an example, an existing business wants to borrow, the rates are higher now, wants to borrow $4 million, but they find a lender that will buy the bond, and because it's through the development authority, it becomes a tax-free bond, which is probably about 3.5% right now. And 3.5% tax-free bond is probably worth 5% to the investor that fronts the money for it. So that's one way that the development authority could be a tool, but it requires that there be a end-user financier to join and partner with the development authority to do it.
Okay, so that is a possibility. And is Sandy Springs ripe for, let's say, like tax allocation districts? Or are there barriers to something like that here in Sandy Springs? Are we not a good location for that sort of intervention?
I'm going to be honest, Dr. Kelly, I'm not sure I can answer that question tonight. I would need to do some additional research on that just to look at each of our nodes within the city,
Just to see.
particularly the north end, to see if it would qualify for a TAD.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Those are my questions.
Ms. Mueller.
So, Chris, just a question. So I know last year in the spring of 2024, we had a creative incentive usage and local economic development by the Georgia Tech students. And there was a really nice table. I don't know if Madison, doing the detail work, has looked at it. But while we have a lot of incentives, kind of piggybacking off of what Dr. Kelly said, while we have them in use, they're not necessarily predominant. And so this wasn't just what you were talking about earlier was you were looking at North Fulton cities, but this went across cities across the U.S. that were similar size, scope. And there were definitely incentives that it looked like other cities took more advantage of, and it could just be the economics around those cities. So I didn't know, are we looking at this at all? What was in that study? Have we looked at that and considered that, or can we if we haven't?
Yeah, so I would say the short answer is we can absolutely look at it. I think that we would have to evaluate how any financial transactions are going to impact the financial position of the city. Because if you're going into additional debt to fund projects, you've only got so much bandwidth before your credit rating gets lowered. And so I think you've got to determine within the context of your financial position, and again, those are going to be directions you receive from the city manager and the elected officials next year. But there are certainly ways that a city can put more money into projects. It just has to determine what level of financial commitment it's willing to expend to do that. I think historically we've been a city that's focused more on letting the private sector structure deals, and that worked really well through until COVID hit and cost went up. And then, there's obviously with interest rates climbing and other factors, the private sector in recent years has not delivered at a pace, but also you hear concerns about the pace of multifamily development. And again, that's so much of where the investment dollars are today, where you can find them. People aren't going to build an office building unless it's something for their own use, for their own business, and they just happen to want a specialty building. We're not an industrial city. We don't have room for warehousing and manufacturing. Medical is always strong, and we've got incredibly robust medical community. And so almost by default, you get back to multifamily and retail as your two asset classes that developers are most interested in and that investors and banks are most interested in financing. And so I think that's, again, we've got to talk about if next year, if you all want to really drill down and push towards a more robust policy on for-sale housing, this will be a great opportunity to do that with this study and look at what financial incentives could be offered for for-sale housing.
Yeah, I guess that the study that the Georgia Tech students, there were incentives that were not financially based. So there were things like could you do things from a zoning or permitting or community development, public relations, those kinds of things. So there are things that, I wasn't really focused as much on the financials. I was on the non-financial. So I'm not suggesting the city should be kicking in more, but are there other things that we could do that are not financial that could help?
Well, you're going to hear from the chief in just a moment about something that he and I have been speaking with, and Eden and Kristen as well, about sprinkler requirements. And that derived 100% out of a conversation we had with the business owner who was having to renovate their building. They were bringing a new user in, and they were going from an architectural and engineering office to a veterinarian clinic, and we made them resprinkle the building. And it was extremely expensive. And I think out of that conversation with a very frustrated building owner, that's how we got to where the chief is going to present tonight. So that is adapting our codes to fit where we want the change to occur. And it could be with sprinkler systems, signage requirements, dumpster wrappings. I mean, there's all different things you can do. You're balancing what you want to see aesthetically with the change that you want to see in the renovation or redevelopment of these buildings. And so that is a part of the way to do that. I mean, you could do expedited permitting. You could try to walk through, those permits more rapidly. That time is money, as they say, and the faster we can process permits, the more attractive that is to developers.
Mr. Baumann.
Brief. Couple questions. You didn't mention the Perimeter Point. That project is for sale. Have you been hearing anything about that deal?
I have been, Andy. I'm under an NDA.
Okay.
But you're correct. That is known to the market that it is for sale. And there is, I think I can say there's some strong interest.
Okay. I mean, that was, I'll throw it out there that as I hear other communities talking about sort of game-changing projects, and it's hard here in Sandy Springs, I continue to hear about the NHL team potentially going either to Milton or to North Point Mall. It's always been a pipe dream of mine that site would be a site to consider for an NHL team. I just wish we were in the conversation. We're not, but let's just see what happens.
Well, you all saw the article about what Forsyth approved recently, a $3 billion.
Nothing's done until it's done.
Yeah. And the question would be, I mean, Sandy Springs by itself can't put that kind of financial support up, but could Fulton County join forces with us? The mayor and I have spoken about that, and Alpharetta already has a pitch going to redevelop North Point Mall.
But we're just internal. We're not in the conversation. I mean, just to confirm, we're not in the conversation on NHL, are we?
That's correct. We are currently not officially in any conversation with the NHL.
Or unofficially. I have one other question.
None that anybody can talk about.
That's correct.
Well, okay. Well, that's good interesting. That's very cryptic.
That's why there's an NDA, so we're getting a little too over our skis.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Wow. Would you go back to the list of companies? I have one question about that, the chart. Very far in the beginning.
Here we go.
You don't have to answer it now. Can you come back? Can you tell us, maybe Madison, how many of these companies identify as being located in Sandy Springs? Can you come back to us with that? I'd like to, this whole list, I mean, should be easy to go to their website and their stationery and say, are they identify as Sandy Springs or they identify as something else? Thank you.
Yep, we'll get that, Eddie.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Chief, come talk to us about fire prevention and protection.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is a consideration that I would like to make some changes to the, are you going to be able to bring up PowerPoint? Some changes to the current fire code that we have in the city when it comes to the sprinkler systems, as well as some amendments that we need to have also in the multi-housing ordinance that you passed recently. The purpose of this request is to align our local fire code with updated state of Georgia standards, remove the redundant provisions that are in the multifamily rental housing ordinance, comparing that to the fire ordinance. There's a lot of redundancy there. Modernize our regulations to support responsible development and ensure clear and enforceable life safety requirements in the multifamily housing. The key revisions is to clarify the approved systems. This talks about sprinkler systems. We'll bring more clarity to the type systems and options that developers have to modify those buildings with various types of systems. Raise the threshold for light hazard areas to 10,000 square feet. Modify the process for approval by the fire marshal so that there's more rapid approval processes versus going through an appeal requirement. Applies to the renovation of 100% of assessed value for commercial buildings only. And this is one clarification that I need to make if you do support this tonight, when we move forward for the formal approval at next council meeting, I will make clarification in here that the multifamily housing requirement will still maintain the 50% assessed value. I want you to understand that we will maintain that as well, because we do have still a hazard there that we need those buildings, once they do have damage in them greater than 50%, that they're required to sprinkle them. Clarifies the calculation that applies to the individual buildings, not the partials. It also triggers the city sprinkler requirements only for buildings undergoing work. The highlights of it is to sprinkle required for new commercial that is greater than 5,000 square feet or light hazard greater than 10. And specific exemptions include for low occupancy storage units, self-storage units, as that's what that means, where there's water reactive materials in those warehouses, and then the small additions that are less than 1,000 square feet with fire barriers. We don't, that's just a part of the code that we have to put in there. Should we have a warehouse that has that in there, or they want to put that in there, it would apply that.
Well, you remember the situation in Rockdale County where the swimming pool company, when they put water on it, so you have chemicals that are stored.
We still have those type of chemicals in the city now, but the intermittent paint language within the code, this would, every apartment complex that did not have sprinkler systems have complied with that. If you recall, when you passed it back in 2016, they had up to 7 years to comply with that. We have some examples of some of the applications were not, the paint was not applied correctly, and we have some that has chipped off, some that has fallen off, and those particular complexes are having to readdress that and reapply that paint. Through the multifamily housing ordinance, those are regular annual inspections, and when we come upon the cases where there's chips in the paint, then they'll be required to reapply that. Also, in the multi-residential housing code, there will be a purpose of the amendment is to, as I said earlier, to remove the duplication of references to the fire marshal in the task force role. The fire marshal already has a role there, and the deputy fire marshals in the inspection process, and that's they're covered under the current fire code. Streamline the inspections and enforcement responsibilities, coordinate inspections without redundancy. And then the summary of the key benefits is to reduce the code conflict, improve enforceability, promote modern, safe construction standards, and then to maintain our public safety without overburdening the property owners. And then support housing inspections with efficiencies. If you approve this, I request for your consideration of it tonight. We'll move forward for your formal approval, and then the legal department will have a codification by the attorney and begin the implementation outreach to our stakeholders. One of the examples that I'd like to bring up, and I've been really looking at this for the last 10 years that I've been here, we have the most stringent sprinkler ordinance, Sandy Springs has the most restrictive sprinkler ordinance that I am aware of. I know it's more, we had a very strict sprinkler ordinance in Alpharetta. Ours is very restrictive. And to give you some of the examples that I've seen, I really have heartburns when I've seen developers and property owners go through this. If you recall, the bank that's there is now Navy Federal Credit Union. They were a bank. And because of our ordinance, they were transitioning to a credit union. They had to upgrade that building with sprinklers. It made no sense, but because of the way our ordinance was, they had to do that. They could have taken that $100,000 to $200,000 and made additional improvements to the exterior part of the building. And those are the things that I want to be able to look at and to have, some discretion there to not require that. The one that Chris mentioned, they had to run a water line because the sprinkler system required a certain fire flow in that building. They had to run a new water line, and we didn't know it until after it was completed, under $285 to that building, which it was in excess, almost $200,000 that owner had to invest in that building. And so this type of revision will eliminate that, and it would, affect about 100 buildings that are throughout our city where this would ease up on that restriction. We have a tremendous, I can say today with peace of mind, that our code enforcement, especially on the fire side, Ginger's group does a tremendous job. Our fire marshal group does a tremendous job. Yes, we have high risk, but we have extremely low frequency of fire events in those because of our code enforcement and the owner's compliance. So I ask you to consider this. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or do more homework if you give me that direction here tonight.
Well, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because I think inadvertently in trying to be very cautious about safety and the people who work and live in buildings, we've created a disincentive for people to maintain and improve their property. And that's not what we ever intended. I think I can say without fear of contradiction, the goal was to make sure they were safe. But the problem is in the goal of trying to make them safe, we may have made them actually unsafer because they're unwilling to make any improvements, because when they exceed a certain threshold of 50%, they're automatically required to do all these things, which adds tremendous cost for very little gain. So by doing this, we're particularly for smaller buildings, it'll be less of a burden. I think it will help stimulate redevelopment or at least some improvements of some of our older retail and other buildings around that they wouldn't even consider doing it. I'm shocked that the building owner said, I think I'll just leave it like it is because it costs so much to run those lines in. So this is more about, we want everybody to be safe, but it's more about removing disincentives to improving property that have inadvertently built up through the years. So we're trying to fix that. Mr. Lee.
Yeah. Mayor, if I could, just adding to the regs that the chief is talking about changing and lessening, I would point out to the council that those were done 10 years ago. And if you need to calculate into this discussion the evolution of the fire department, in addition to the different, as he mentioned earlier, the building codes. We now have response times that you didn't have when this came up. The data that the chief has accumulated indicates that the recovery or the the calls of the fire department are commensurate with lessening these kinds of stringent rules. So the two go hand in hand. It's not just, this is easy, let's change them. It's commensurate with, it's safe because of the development and the evolution of the fire department simultaneous with that.
Thank you.
Ms. Mueller.
So Chief, thank you. I think that I brought to you the NMS and Peyton issue, and I think that was adding, to echo what the mayor and what yourself has said, it was adding, I think, $400,000. They had already done their paint cycle. They weren't due. They didn't have any, I want to say, infractions, cracks, or anything, and it was going to cost another $400,000 to reapply paint that they didn't have to reapply. So thank you for taking that and working with Ginger's team and bringing it forward.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. Chief, thank you very much for this. As I was reading through this, it occurred to me that the ultimate in bureaucracy is when somebody who needs to do something reads the instructions, and when they get done reading the instructions, they don't understand what they've just been asked to do. So it sounds to me like you're clarifying this so that at least from the user side, they read this, they understand what the rules are, what they need to do, and if you can give somebody relief where it's needed, I think that's great, but clarity of rules and regulations, I think, is also a very positive part of this. So, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Rochelle.
I just want to thank you for making sure that this does not apply to multifamily housing,
Yes,
because that was my concern. How many multifamily communities don't have sprinkler systems?
I will get you the exact number for next meeting, but it's upward. We got 98 apartment complexes, and I believe it's in the 70s.
70s do not have?
There are 70 complexes do not have the sprinkler systems.
And were they built since a certain year? When was it start? When did we start requiring it?
2016 is when you place since the city's been in inception, any new construction that took place, they had to have sprinklers in them.
So anything that was built after 2005 has sprinkler systems, and you're saying
Yes, right.
over 70 units
adopted.
do not, because they were built before 2005?
That is correct. I don't know that I can check that for you, but
Any other discussion? All right, Chief, we'll be voting on this soon.
thank you so much.
All right, that'll end our work session. Moving to regular order. I'd like to call this meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council to order for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. Will the city clerk please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Individuals who would like to provide a public comment at a city council meeting are required to complete and submit those public comment cards in advance of the meetings. Public comment cards are available online and at the chamber entrance. Those providing public comment may be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on their single chosen topic. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Rusty Paul.
Present.
Councilmember John Paulson. Councilmember Melody Kelly. Councilmember Melissa Mueller.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Rochelle. Councilmember Tibby DiGiulio. Councilmember Andy Bauman.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, we've received one public comment card this evening from Mr. Bill Griffith.
Mr. Griffith, welcome back.
Mr. Mayor and council members, 4 weeks ago, I discussed part of the Roberts Drive speed study, Now I want to finish that discussion. I trust that y'all have seen a copy of that study. Number 5, on slide 8, regarding a, quote, Roberts Drive crash history, end quote. As shown on slide 5, the study area was, quote, Roberts Drive from Roswell Road to the Georgia 400 overpass, a distance of approximately 0.8 of a mile. The study shows 7 accidents in the 67 months ending July 24. My comments first. The study area omits the approximate 0.3 of a mile east of the 400 overpass. However, accidents there are part of the backstory related to the dangerous conditions on Roberts Drive. Second, by not reporting accidents prior to 2019, the study omits a significant number of accidents. And third, there have been more accidents in the area and time shown on the slide than are shown. The study omitted 4 accidents that I described previously that were in the study's area and time. Thus, adding those 4 to the 7 included in the study reveals that at least 11 accidents during this 67-month period, an average of 2 per year. And those are just the ones of which I'm aware. B, quote, findings, no crash patterns were identified that would prompt additional engineering requirements. My comment, I don't know what all is meant by treatments. However, an average of 2 accidents a year on an approximate 0.8 of a mile stretch of a residential street, most of which were single car accidents where the car left the road, surely deserves additional treatments. Number 6, on slide 9, per the city traffic calming policy, Roberts Drive does not qualify for installation of traffic calming devices such as speed cushions because, first, Roberts Drive is a collector road and traffic calming devices such as speed cushions are not allowed on collector roads because at 35 miles an hour, speed cushions can be a hazard, end quote. My comment, anything that's created by people can be changed, even city ordinances. Thus, policies, road classifications, and speed limits can be changed. Next, quote, the 85th percentile speed was 8 miles an hour over the speed limit, which would qualify for radar speed feedback signs. However, the location has 2 such signs, end quote. My comment, 15% of the drivers, or 621 vehicles a day, were going more than 8 miles an hour over the limit. What's not shown is that during the 48-hour study period, 3 vehicles were going between 50 and 59 miles an hour. Mathematically, 50 miles an hour is equivalent to 100 miles an hour on an interstate highway where the speed limit is 70. Furthermore, as previously discussed, those 2 speed signs are not effective with a lot of drivers. I'll be back.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Mr. DiGiulio.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the regular meeting agenda for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025.
We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve the meeting agenda as published. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on approval of the meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the consent
Mayor
agenda?
Paul, I
Ms.
move that we
Rochelle.
approve the consent agenda for Tuesday, June 17th.
Ms. Rochelle moves approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the approval of the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Consent agenda is approved. Moving to public hearings, will the clerk please read the first item?
This is agenda item number 2025-116, consideration of an ordinance to provide for the adoption of a budget, its execution in effect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30, 2026. This is the second public hearing, presented by City Manager Eden Freeman.
Ms. Freeman.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This evening, we are excited to bring forward tonight for your final consideration the FY 2026 proposed budget. This is the second public hearing and Council's scheduled vote to adopt the budget. This is the 20th anniversary of the city and is our official 20th budget. We are excited to get this moving forward this year, and in addition, this is an all-funds budget of a little over $1 billion, which, as Council is aware of, includes all of our prior debt issuances and the capital cost of things such as this facility, as well as the police headquarters and municipal court complex. The general fund budget included in this is $158,789,916. I am happy to answer any questions that council may have about the budget that is before you this evening.
All right. Have we got any public comment cards? All right. We'll close the public hearing portion of the budget. Is there a motion to approve the budget?
Mayor Paul,
Mr. Paulson.
I move we approve agenda item 2025-116, an ordinance to provide for the adoption of the budget, its execution, and effect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025, ending June 30, 2026.
Have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve agenda item 2025-116, an ordinance providing for the adoption of a budget. Any discussion?
Great job, staff.
Thank
Guys,
you.
this is a lot of work. We threw a lot of questions at you. You answered all of them. I appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the budget. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The budget is approved.
Thank
Clerk
you.
will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-117. This is consideration of a resolution to adopt the 2024-2025 annual capital improvement element update, presented by Planning and Zoning Manager Michelle McIntosh Ross.
Ms. McIntosh Ross.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Regarding this item, I request a deferral to hear back while we await word from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. As you recall, we submitted a draft back in April 15th, and they did have some comments which we addressed. So we are waiting for their approval from us addressing those comments. So I would like to request a deferral until we hear back from Georgia Department of Community Affairs.
We don't have we thought we would have the information back from DCA by now. We don't have it. We may have to have a special call meeting on June 30th if we hear back from DCA.
Correct.
I'll be with Commissioner Nunn this weekend, and I will pose the question. Can we get our response?
Yes.
So I need a motion to defer.
Mayor Paul.
Mr.
I
Paulson.
move that we defer item 2025-117, resolution to adopt the 2024-5 annual capital improvement element update until we get the response back from the state,
DCA.
Yeah.
DCA.
Department of Community Affairs.
DCA.
Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we defer agenda item 2025-117, adopting the 2024-25 annual capital improvement element update. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2025-117, the deferral. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you.
The item is deferred. Moving to new business, the clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-118. This is consideration of a resolution to approve a task order for call center services, presented by Communications and Public Relations Director Carter Long.
Ms. Long.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight you have before you a request to approve a task order for our call center services. Last year, after a competitive RFP process, we signed a 5-year contract with Fanwell for our call center services and signed the first task order. Tonight's task order is our second in our 5-year contract, and it includes a 5% escalator. Contractual terms and conditions have been met, so staff recommends the approval of this task order for the amount of $668,871.
All right, you've heard the report of the Communications and Public Relations Director. What's the desire of council? Dr. Kelly.
I move approval of agenda item 2025-118, a resolution to approve a task order for call center services.
Have a motion by Dr. Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve agenda item 2025-118, a resolution approving a task order for call center services. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2025-118, a resolution approving task order for call center services. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-119, consideration and approval of the City of Sandy Springs General Liability Insurance Renewal for the fiscal year 2026, presented by Human Resources Director Liz Aubrey.
Ms. Aubrey.
Good evening. I am actually going to defer to Mike Royal, but I wanted to give him a royal welcome. So he is here to present from Partner Risk Services, and we have Bob Seville from Seville Public Entity as well. Just in case there's someone in the back that gets called out, I want you to be aware of their partnership. So thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Royal, good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Thank you for the introduction, and it's been another privilege to work with you over another year of a very a very hard insurance market, particularly in the municipality area and government area. I wanted to mention right out because we've talked about it many times about looking at larger deductibles, potentially self-insured items. We did large deductible calculations for you this year and presented those to the staffs. And there just really wasn't much savings in doing so for the exposure that it brought. We looked at deductibles. Right now, primarily everything's at $25,000 with the exception of some of the auto and the police cruisers, which are mainly at $5,000, and some of the larger fire equipment is at $10,000. Other than that, pretty much everything's at $25,000. But looking at deductible options of $50,000, $100,000, it really didn't offer much benefit to the city, particularly for the risk that would be taking on from a budgetary analysis. And to move to a much higher, really $250,000 for the size of the city, you're really looking at going to a significant loss reserve that would have to be put up in different letters of credit and whatnot to go to what would really be a true self-insured program. So really moving into those numbers, this is where we are. This is where we landed on this year. We did go out and talked with many carriers in the marketplace about city of Sandy Springs and the losses, and reviewed those, and this is what we're faced with. You're being faced with what a lot of municipalities are. Don't really want to get up and give many names, but several have been forced into a self-insured status because of their claims history, and that is not the case with Sandy Springs. Sandy Springs is really one of the best in class. So when we were out to market talking to other carriers and different reinsurers and whatnot, we actually were able to get their ear because of the professionalism that your staff and that your folks out there on the street do possess, and they are. So I'll be glad to go through any of these, answer any questions you've got. We've gone over this, like I said, extensively with staff. And one thing I will mention is the governor and the legislature this year did pass a very significant tort reform bill. I actually worked a lot on that. I helped work with legislation on that and worked with some of the wording and some of the different community and business groups in helping that. Some of it will apply to municipalities and government entities, and some of it will not. But what I will say is I'm already seeing signs in the marketplace of an improved environment out there, and it will help bring other markets into play. I'm not going to get up here and make any promises for you or say it's going to reduce anything by a set amount, but I really do think we are headed in a better direction. It was a hard fight in the legislature to get that done, and I do want to applaud a lot of the work. And as a practitioner out there, I've already started to see some results from it. So I am optimistic that the marketplace will become better in Georgia, particularly for risks like you, but absolutely not going to get up here and make any promises tonight.
All right. Ms. Aubrey, you got anything else to add? All right. You've heard the reports of the Human Resources Director and our insurance advisor. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2025-119, approval of the City of Sandy Springs General Liability Insurance Renewal for fiscal year 2025 as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2025-119, the City of Sandy Springs General Liability Insurance Renewal for 2026. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the renewal of the liability insurance for 2026. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-106. This is consideration of a resolution authorizing amendments to the city's purchasing policies to incorporate the requirements of 2 CFR Part 200 and FTA Circular 4220.1F in connection with Federal Transit Administration funded procurements undertaken as, MARTA subrecipient, and to incorporate the provisions of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in connection with procurements for city projects receiving federal funding. This is presented by Purchasing Director Connie Donnelly.
Ms. Donnelly.
Good evening, Mayor Paul, members of City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Over the past year, our staff have implemented best practice procurement processes, securing competitive bids, conducting careful proposal reviews, and ensuring transparency at every stage. What I'm presenting today is not a change in our core operations, but a formal alignment between our policy and our practices. These revisions are essential to ensure accountability, compliance, and clarity across the procurement efforts. I will be presenting these policy revisions in two parts. Part 1 will be discussing mandatory changes required by MARTA, and Part 2, regarding administrative changes to enhance clarity for compliance purposes. If you would like to follow along with the proposed changes to the policy, they begin on page 180 of the agenda packet. So Part 1, discussing mandatory changes required by MARTA. This is going to be found on page 232. It's a new section added, section 13. It's been added to ensure compliance with federal requirements under 2 CFR Part 200 and FTA Circular 4220.1F. As a subrecipient of a MARTA-funded grant, the city must follow standards applicable to non-federal entities acquiring goods and services with federal funds. This includes the use of excess federal property, restrictions on contract types, such as time and materials, recovered materials mandates, and bonding requirements for construction projects. This policy codification is necessary to maintain eligibility and proper stewardship of federal grant funds. Part 2, administrative changes for clarity and legal compliance. So we'll start with Section 4, titled Duties and Responsibilities. This is going to be item B, titled Source Selection, can be found on page 202. So this section, the updates, just pretty much includes the department heads and their designees as an approval, reflecting practice and ensuring relevant expertise, and basically ensuring that relevant expertise guides vendor selection. For Section 5, purchasing thresholds, item A, this is purchases below $5,000, can be found on page 204. It formally requires adherence to the PCART policy, reinforcing control for low-dollar purchases. Section 5, purchasing thresholds, this is going to be item B, purchases between $5,000 to up to $200,000. This can be found on page 204 through 205. It mandates formal bidding above for purchases that have an expenditure above $100,000, and it is in accordance with Georgia law. It also raises the formal bid threshold from $99,000 to $100,000 to align with those state requirements. Section 5, purchasing thresholds, item C, purchases over $150,000. This can be found on page 205. It just corrects the threshold limit for changes previously approved by the council on June 18th of 2024. Section 5, purchasing thresholds, item E, change orders, can be found on page 206 through 207. The changes clarify roles for approval of change orders, and it adds the city manager's approval for time extensions for 90 days or less, and requires city council's approval for time extensions for 91 days or greater. Section 6, non-competitive procurements. Item B, direct negotiation. There is an additional section that prohibits direct negotiation for construction and public works projects in compliance with OCGA Title 369120 and OCGA Title 369121. Section 7, competitive procurements. Item B, public notice, can be found on page 211. Requires a 30-day notice on the Georgia Procurement Registry for construction bids for projects that have an expenditure of greater than $100,000, and this is in compliance with OCGA Title 369120. Section 7, competitive procurements, item D, invitation to bid. This can be found on page 212. It introduces a technical waiver document to support transparency in bid correction or irregularity handling. It creates a sense of consistency in managing minor irregularities. And the last section is Section 7, competitive procurement. This is going to be a new section added. Section I, procurement activity coordination, can be found on page 118. It designates the purchasing division as the sole coordinator for solicitation events such as pre-bid events, site visits, and negotiations. It promotes consistency and transparency with the public. So in summary, these adjustments formalize practices already in place, improves compliance with state and federal requirements, and ensure clarity for all stakeholders involved. I respectfully seek your approval to move forward with these revisions so that we may continue operating with the higher standards of integrity, efficiency, and transparency.
Thank you, Ms. Donnelly. You've heard the report of the purchasing director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul,
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2025-106, resolution authorizing amendments to the city's purchasing policies to incorporate the requirements of 2 CFR Part 200 and FTA Circular 4220.1F in connection with Federal Transit Administration, FTA federal funded procurement undertaken as a MARTA subrecipient, and to incorporate the provisions of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in connection with the procurement for city projects receiving federal funding.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve agenda item 2025-106, a resolution authorizing amendments to city purchasing policies incorporating requirements of 2 CFR Part 200 and the FTA Circular 4220, and also the incorporation provisions of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in connection with procurements of city projects. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul,
Mr. Paulson.
just a quick question for you. This new procedure, the purchasing team will now handle all pre-bid meetings to make sure vendors get the same accurate information. Were we having confusion with that before? That's why you guys needed to clarify this?
No, it just strengthens our policy in connection with training our staff, and for me, it helps when there is new staff members coming aboard. It helps us to direct them to the policy that says, hey, pre-bid or pre-proposal conferences are facilitated by the procurement division. And it's just not saying that anything has happened in the past. It just avoids any confusion, even when it comes to negotiations. So it closes the door for those closed door negotiations, whereas maybe you have a departmental staff maybe having negotiations with contractors behind the scenes where there's no transparency. So during those negotiations, everything has to be structured and documented. And so this addition to the policy, it just helps us to make sure that everyone is following the rules.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-106, a resolution authorizing amendments to city's purchasing policies to incorporate the requirements of 2 CFR Part 200, FTA Circular 4220 in connection with the Federal Transit Administration and funded procurement undertaken as a MARTA subrecipient, and to incorporate provisions of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in conjunction with its procurements for city projects receiving federal funding. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-120, consideration of a resolution to accept an agreement to purchase fee simple right-of-way and temporary construction easement related to property located at 6039 Caron Drive and Land Lot 71, the 17th District, City of Sandy Springs, Fulton County, Georgia. That's tax ID number 17007100030369 in relation to the S2193 Hammond Drive widening project, presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Tonight I bring before you right-of-way acquisition at 6039 Caron Drive in support of project S2193 Hammond Drive widening project. In this particular acquisition, the city staff proposed that we acquire some 2,386.37 square feet of fee simple right-of-way and another 784.42 square feet of temporary construction easement in regard to constructing the project S2193 Hammond Drive widening project. After significant negotiations, the city and property owners have come to an amicable agreement in the amount of $270,000 based upon a recent update of the city's appraisal performed in March 2025 with a valuation of $250,600 at the time. Subject parcel is a single-family residential property that will be significantly impacted by the project. Approximately 32% of the agreed-upon compensation is due to both cost to cure compensation as well as compensation for consequential damages in this case. For a little more information on 6039 K-Ron Drive, if you're familiar with the concept layout for Hammond Drive, it constructs two-lane sections of Hammond Drive north of the existing Hammond Drive. 6039 K-Ron right now is 2 parcels removed from Hammond Drive. Once the project's constructed, it'll be the property at the corner of Hammond Drive and K-Ron, all said and done. Those 2 parcels will be incorporated into the construction of the new roadway. So it has both proximity to the new 4-lane roadway that will be being built, and as well, if you recollect in the concept for Hammond Drive at K-Ron, there's also this neighborhood underpass, the pedestrian connection that happens at K-Ron. Roadway terminates, but with cul-de-sacs on either side of the new roadway. This property is at that very corner of K-Ron where that cul-de-sac takes place. In this case, the roadway will encroach into the front yard of this property by some 30 to 40 feet at its most significant point there, in the interest of creating that cul-de-sac and that pedestrian access facility to get to the underpass here. So significant encroachments on 2 sides as a part of this relatively newly constructed home built 2019-2020 adjacent to Hammond Drive widening. So with all that said and those impacts understood on the project, staff recommends that Mayor and Council accept the negotiated amount of $270,000 for impacts to the property and the acquisition of right-of-way and temporary construction easements for pursuance of this project.
All right, you've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve Agenda Item 2025-120, a resolution to accept an agreement to purchase fee simple right-of-way and temporary construction easement related to property located at 6039 K-Ron Drive and Land Lot 71 of the 17th District, City of Sandy Springs, Fulton County, Georgia, tax ID number 17-007-1-0003-036-9 in relation to the S2193 Hammond Drive widening project.
We have a motion by Ms. Mueller. Is there a second? Motion by Ms. Mueller, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve Agenda Item 2025-120, accepting an agreement to purchase fee simple right-of-way and temporary construction easements related to property located at 6039 K-Ron Drive. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on Agenda Item 2025-120, accepting an agreement to purchase fee simple right-of-way and temporary construction easement related to property at 6039 K-Ron Drive. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to the next item, the clerk will please read it.
Agenda item number 2025-121. This is consideration of a resolution to authorize city staff to submit a Safe Streets for All grant program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program, to approve the required local funding match, and to authorize the city manager to execute the application documents. This is presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and Council, tonight we bring before you a recommendation to submit a grant application in the amount of $5,440,000 for an implementation grant for the Safe Streets for All program. As you recollect, a little earlier this year, you approved the Safety Action Plan with an accomplishment or target achievement goal of 2040 in the interest of the Safety Action Plan. Tonight, we have our first opportunity now with a completed and endorsed safety action plan to pursue a safety program implementation grant. So with that, a few more details on the application. Next slide, please. Based on the notice of funding opportunity, applications are due on June 26th of this year. available to those with, as I mentioned, an adopted safety action plan. All funds, one important constraint, criteria to consider in the notice of funding opportunity outline was the ability, the funds to be expended within 5 years after the grant agreement is executed. That NOFO also encouraged bundling of different projects, strategies, activities, etc. It does require a 20% local match, as so many of our other federal grants do. And priority is given in this case to activities totaling less than $10 million, and those that include at least 3 of the 5 safe system approaches outlined in the program. Next slide, please. The infrastructure projects, the one we're most familiar with in Public Works. With this first implementation grant, an emphasis on safe pedestrian crossings. As you recollect from the Safety Action Plan, a lot of our projects and recommendations within the Safety Action Plan are generated by high injury network and identification therein, which the plan did. These pedestrian crossings are focused on reduction of those high injury network injuries, primarily, in this case, vulnerable pedestrian users. Identified, of course, our major roadways there, Roswell Road near Mystic Place, Roswell Road near Northwood Drive, and Roswell Road between Trowbridge Road and Cimarron Parkway. As well, a pair of crossings on Dunwoody Place between Summit Springs Drive and Roberts Drive. If you recollect from the Access Management Study, our corollary study is in support of the Safe Streets Safety Action Plan, it identified those Roswell Road pedestrian crossings. And then the North End Traffic Safety Study as well was an identifier for those safety improvements on Dunwoody Place. Also, providing safety enhancements are recognized at signalized intersections. Roswell Road at Spalding Drive, that intersection, improving pedestrian safety features there at that signalized intersection. And Johnson Ferry Road at Glenridge Drive, near 5605 Glenridge Drive, I'll define that as the Haverty's location, south of 285, as the intersection. We propose improvements there as well, also identified in the Safety Action Plan. And as well as you recollect from the Powers Ferry Small Area Plan, implementation of efforts to reinforce one-way street movements and pedestrian safety features associated with that in that particular location. Next slide, please. Beyond infrastructure projects, the Safe Streets for All planning team, a multi-departmental team, also recommended some of the following improvements. On the Sandy Springs Fire Department side, providing LED illuminated traffic cones and motorist safety vests to enhance safety during responses to incidents that occur after darkness. Better equip our fire department to respond to vehicle emergency or vehicle accidents after hours. And create a 5-year expansion of funding for the cardiopulmonary resuscitation program classes for the public. Next slide, please. Thanks to our communications department as well, develop a 5-year educational campaign targeting aggressive and distracted driving, as well as a program to improve safety for our teen drivers. As well, hopefully, with the support of fire, enhance our child passenger safety program that fire already undertakes, just hopefully expanding it in this case. Next slide. Staff recommends your approval of this application. Again, federal share for this total application would be some $5.4 million or $5,400,000 with a local match required at if and when the grant is approved of $1,360,000.
All right, you've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council? Mr. Paulson.
Hang on. I move approval of agenda item 2025-121, authorizing city staff to submit a Safe Streets for All Grants program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program, to approve the required local funding match and to authorize the city manager to execute the application documents.
A motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle. that we approve agenda item 2025-121, authorizing city staff to submit a Safe Streets for All grant program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program. Any discussion?
I have discussion.
Dr. Kelly.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to discuss Trowbridge really quickly. If I wanted to get a sense of what our broader vision was for improving that particular area, that intersection in particular, where would be the best place for me to look out of all our studies? I know we're doing a little more minor things right now, and I see now we're thinking about a pedestrian crosswalk, but just do we have a place? Because I know we did the Roswell Road access management, a few other plans.
So, Kristen, I think our access management plan is going to be the single best reference for a bigger vision for particular parts of Roswell Road right now, especially as it relates to pedestrian safety, access management, et cetera.
Okay, so if I were to go to it, would it be fair to say that the plan includes the crossings that you have proposed here, as well as the modifications that are currently underway for the intersection?
For the pedestrian crossings, yes.
Okay.
And I think I'm right on all cases on those pedestrian crossings. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll take a look at that, because it's somewhat of a unique intersection in that it's of course had a significant amount of crashes. I mean, there's data to support it being a significant intersection, but it's also the only way in and out for one particular neighborhood.
Right.
And it also intersects with another business. There's a curb cut there too for the Walgreens. So it's a really messy intersection for a variety of reasons that may not necessarily be traditional intersection issues. So just wanted to bring that to our attention so we can keep it in mind. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Dr. Kelly, I would add to that as well. As we attack, again, with the NOFO this time, it stressed the need that we execute within about 5 years. So the mid-block pedestrian crossings gave us that greatest sense that within a 5-year period, we could go through all of the compliance hurdles associated with federal dollars to include NEPA coordination, et cetera, and be able to implement it. But what we hope to do as we move on to the Transportation Master Plan update this coming year is, with Safety Action Plan now in hand, look to further explore other opportunities to implement access management and safety enhancements, again, probably better addressed then in areas like Trowbridge, where we're talking about multiple access points, et cetera, and how access management may be able to better address that as well. So we'll look for bigger projects that we would potentially seed, at least, or at least envision within the upcoming Transportation Master Plan as a part of where we take the next steps here.
And we are still, just correct me if I'm wrong, we are still waiting on, I guess, Georgia Power or GDOT to turn on the crosswalk that we've already constructed.
The mid-block crossing at the Fulton Government Center is reprocurement on the part of the Georgia Department of Transportation at this point. So they were on, their part of the deal was to install the signal hardware, at the North Fulton Government Center.
But we
They're reprocuring at this point. The hardscape, the flat work, we've completed already. We've had that done for some time. They had problems with their initial procurement and the scope of work they defined there. They had to go out for reprocurement, in this case, to go get the work done. But they're taking that on at this point. They did give us that update. They are reprocuring.
Okay. It's just taking a while.
It does. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2025-121, a resolution for city staff to submit a Safe Streets for All grant program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-122, This is consideration to authorize the city attorney to seek equitable relief in the Superior Court of Fulton County for the illegal short-term rental activity occurring at the real property located at 8069 Kinstone Court, Sandy Springs, Fulton County, Georgia. Presented by City Attorney Danley.
Mr. Lee.
Mayor and Council, I'm afraid this is going to be an example of some other issues we're going to have to bring back to council. There's a movement in the world to to take title to property in not an individual but a company. And when that house is being operated illegally, our courts that are our city court that is not a court of equity only has the authority to fine and maybe even jail those that violate our ordinances. It's impossible to put a company in jail. And when they don't respond, as in the case of this, the property owner at 8069 Kinstone Drive, it's a company called Failsafe Data LLC, which is an Ohio limited partnership that Ohio and the principal in that company is someone in Pennsylvania with a manager in Florida. It makes it impossible, especially when they won't appear in court, to enforce our rules. And as you know and has witnessed at council meetings, we've had neighbors complaining about the activity going on in the house that does not have, this is one of the violations, a short-term rental permit. Under our ordinances, you have to have a business license. This property does not have a business license. They have failed and refused to appear in court 3 times and a 4th time as of yesterday. And the request before you today is to authorize me to file for help with the Superior Court, a court of equity that would place a hold on the property, give our police department an order so that if somebody were to appear in it without these licenses, that we could bar someone from being there. It's the only way that we know of that we can enforce our ordinances.
All right, you've heard the report of the city attorney. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
It is with pleasure I read item 2025. I offer it for approval. Authorize the city attorney to seek equitable relief in the Superior Court of Fulton County for the illegal short-term rental activity occurring at the real property located at 8069 Kenstone Court, Sandy Springs, Georgia.
I have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve agenda item 2025-122, allowing the city attorney to seek equitable relief in Superior Court of Fulton County for the illegal short-term rental activity occurring at real property located at 8069 Kenstone Court. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
Thank you very much for doing this, Dan. This is a little bitty neighborhood. I think there's 6 houses, 5 houses in there. And this particular house has been so disruptive to these other homes. It's to the point where several have actually moved because there's just been they don't feel like they're having any recourse. They don't have any power to stop this. It continues. It's very disruptive. It can be dangerous. It goes on all hours of the night. So the people that live here are going to be very happy that this happens. I assume this means we padlock this place so people can't go operate it on a Saturday night without anybody knowing. That's part of this?
That'll be the action. We'll ask the court to give us permission to do that. I would point out to you that, and this is again, the reason we're here tonight is because of the flaw in the law that only allows the city to arrest, to convict, fine, and jail. Because this is a company, the staff first cited this property in December of 24 and followed most of the processes that are allowed by the city, and we've just gotten no response, no cooperation from the property owner. And I say it again, we've come across this before. We have it with apartment complexes. There's a company that owns them, and we're limited in how quickly we can enforce our ordinances. So I with heavy heart, I suspect that we're going to be back here very shortly, and we're already developing a process to try and get these things in front of you quicker, so that when it is a corporate name like that, we're not waiting 6 months to drop a hammer on.
And just to finish the thought, I've been hearing about this house for since December 24. I've been hearing about it for well over a year. And these people are just very frustrated. Maybe they should have called earlier and complained more earlier, but irrespective, thank you for doing this. Let's get this done.
Ms. Rochelle.
How long will it take to get through the process? And can we start enforcing it now, or we have to wait, right?
The process will be, we'll seek what's called an ex parte temporary order from the Superior Court, which will lock the house, and then the property owner gets a hearing within 30 days of that signing of that order. And they have to show up, which is and if they don't show up, they can be held in contempt of court. I would suspect they have to be. In Superior Court, a corporation can't represent itself because it's not an individual, so they'll have to have a lawyer.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-122, authorizing the city attorney to seek equitable relief in the Superior Court of Fulton County for the illegal short-term rental activity occurring at the real property of 8069 Kenstone Court. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Go get the order. Reports, a lot of us are going to be in Savannah this weekend is the annual Georgia Municipal Association convention. A busy weekend. Some of us are taking classes. I'm going to a lot of different meetings over the 4 days that I'll be there, from the Board of Directors to the Legislative Policy Council to I'm chairing the Transportation Policy Committee meeting Sunday morning, 11:45. If you got nothing better to do, come sit down and watch us go through the transportation. We're going to talk a little bit about rail. First time we've talked about rail in Georgia in quite a while, and so that's going to be the focus of that. And then Sunday afternoon, the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association is meeting. I'll be chairing that. And Mr. Lee is going to come down and talk to the mayors about the Milton case and what we need to be thinking about as municipalities as we await the Supreme Court deciding to hear the case. So that's it for me. Anybody else? Dr. Kelly. I figured.
Okay. Yeah, I'm excited about Savannah as well. Also want to invite everybody in 2 days to our Juneteenth event, which will be from 5 to 8 p.m. Similar to last year, it'll have 3 spaces. We'll be in Byers Theater from 5:30 to 6:30. The City Green will be full of activity from 5 to 8, and we'll have a digital art exhibition from 5 to 8 as well in Byers Lobby. So lots of partners, lots of really great events this year and activities for families to engage in. So encourage everyone to come out. And I just want to thank all the staff members who've been involved in the event as well. And I know I've been getting on y'all nerves. Sorry. Okay.
Anybody else? All right. We'll move on to staff reports. Ms. Carlisle, talk to us about the unaudited financials.
Good evening. This is the review for April 2025. We are at 83.33% of the budget year. Revenues are at 103.04%, and expenditures are at 78.69%. Just want to point out business licenses. The season closed 3/31. We have achieved the budget at $10.2 million in April. The expenditures are moving as projected. Most of the budgets are at least 85% of the budget year. This concludes the financial report for April 2025.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the Chief Financial Officer? All right, hearing none, we need a motion to move to executive session for the purposes of real estate and litigation.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move that we suspend regular order and move into executive session for the purposes of real estate and litigation.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? A motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. Giulio, that we suspend regular order and move into executive session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the suspension of regular order. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are in executive session. We will return here after executive session, reconvene to regular order, and adjourn. There will be no further business conducted this evening. Mr. DeGiulio moves adjournment. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Paulson. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned at 9:13 p.m.